I just rolled credits on Avowed.
Just a little spark. Little power goes a long way.
And after roughly just over 50 hours of playing, I'm still not entirely sure what to make of Obsidian's new RPG.
Us.
What I mean by that is that Avowed is a very, very solid RPG. It's one of the best RPGs I've played in some time, but it also has just some issues that are hard to get past that put a cap on it. It keeps it in this space of being a good RPG, but never a great RPG. In this, I feel it's a little bit different, that there are a lot of things that just sit in good, but nothing that goes into great. And at times it gets so frustratingly close to reaching that point of great RPG in certain areas that it just makes me want to throw things. Oh shit. All that said, Avowed might end up being one of the most underrated RPGs of 2025, because it seems right now that so many people are currently sleeping on this game. And yes, there will be spoilers in this video, so if you're looking to avoid all spoilers, well, I have a first impressions that's going to be kind of mirroring a lot of this. Just this has more detail. Avowed is a new first-person RPG with an optional, somewhat functional third-person mode from Obsidian, set in the same world of their Pillars of Eternity franchise, Eora. It's a game that sought to bring in a new audience into their IP while doing the best to shrug off comparisons to Skyrim given its first-person aesthetics. You are the Envoy, a potentially pretentious pompous prick coming from the massive empire of Adir. And you coincidentally are a godlike.
You mean a god gave you that face?
Which means you have a bunch of shit on your face. Hi there, I'm the Envoy of Adir, and I'm here to make you hate imperialism. Nice to meet you. You're also, well, unclaimed by any god. Like, you're kind of a bastard in that sense, I guess. A god bastard? A bastard godling face? Through your adventures in the Living Lands, you will try to figure out the origins of a plague, which is totally not still a sore spot for some of us. You'll uncover the mysteries of the world you're inhabiting, find out the depths of your history, and make determinations that will have a lasting impact on Eora. All while you take your duty very, very, very seriously. I mean, there's really only one thing we can do, right? Like, we gotta. Oh, fuck!
You're one of those people who takes requests, not orders, aren't you?
Shut up, Kai. Oh, it's also a game where the coolest ability you get that really just seems awesome, you don't get until the end. And you get to use it like twice.
Make the Inquisitor proud.
It's an RPG that does exactly what it sets out to. It brings in a new audience, people like myself, who hadn't played the Pillars of Eternity games yet, but now want to double back and play them. It provides a lengthy adventure with exciting exploration, thrilling, crunchy combat, a compelling story, and interesting companions that work well in combat with you. Which actually makes me wonder if a game like Dragon Age the Veilguard would have worked better as a spin-off like this than a mainline series game. Perhaps a smart way to dabble in a new idea for a long-standing IP is to do exactly what Avowed did. Avowed hits on so much in this game, which makes the places where it misses that much more frustrating. A deceptive lack of depth to some companions, skills, enemies, and story that at times falls flat curtails the potential of this RPG, and ironically, that might even be by design. First, let's talk about one of the systems in the game that I had the most love-hate relationship with outside of companions, which will come later. Character progression. Avowed works on a sort of classless system where you can pick and choose skills from different trees, making your own class and freely swapping out all of the armor, weapons, and spells. The character class system is not a hugely deep system, with about 30 levels worth of skill points to add between a mix of active skills and passives. Some skills work well together, while others only work with different playstyles. It's solid, it's okay. I wouldn't say it's anything groundbreaking, but it's got enough so that it does actually feel somewhat satisfying leveling up because you will get stronger. It's one of the spots where I wish they had more. I wish they had more choices, and I wish I was able to mix and match a little bit better. I didn't really feel like I was fully committing to any one type of class hybrid type. I felt like I had to kind of slip into, well, I'm just going to be this two-handed weapon guy that throws spells out every now and then. To get those skills though, well, to level up, you're going to spend a lot of time questing. NPCs in Avowed do not respawn, which is probably a good thing given that they don't really grant that much experience either, and they can take a little while to kill. Thankfully, the quests are largely fun to do, with some of the best quests in the game and the ones with the most rewarding moral choices tending to be side quests, and even some that are completely found by exploration, like running across a trial of combat down in a little cove with this skeleton dude who has this really nifty sword that fucking bleeds. Yes, you heard me, it fucking bleeds. Combat in Avowed is in an interesting place though, because quite honestly, despite some of those limitations I've already mentioned, like class skill trees being a little underwhelming, as well as the fact that you'll quite honestly be spending a lot of time just doing quick attacks, it still feels good, and it grows on you the longer you play, especially at higher difficulties, because there's actually a fluid mix of spells, grenades, devastating abilities, and various weapon sets to get behind. What could have felt like sometimes lackluster combat is often improved by various buildups from fire to frost to poison and bleeding. It's this little meta game of trying to apply statuses to your enemies, melding your skills together with your companions, or even using some summoned short-term companions like spirit bears, wraiths, and so on. You can find them in-game from items or from skills in the skill tree. The game makes up for some of the skill tree blandness with a variety of items and weapon types and the ability to mix and match and actually swap weapons. Though I did quickly find that the way the skills were laid out, I was strongly incentivized to focus on just one weapon type, like the two-handed sword, with the occasional spell thrown in for added accumulations, or healing myself. Combat isn't particularly hard as long as you have the right gear and levels to progress, but you will be doing most of the heavy lifting on your own as your companions won't be killing anything themselves, but they can still be very, very helpful to you.
Well, that was certainly a nightmare.
But we're saving companions for the end because I have so many fucking thoughts. But I always have thoughts. I'm loud and opinionated. So thanks for being here. One of the game's real gems, though, is the lore. I highly recommend taking the time to read scattered journals and lore notes. Whether the entries tie directly into your actions or simply serve as atmospheric world building, many of these texts are dark, grim, and deeply immersive. As someone who was unfamiliar with the IP, it's like this whole treasure trove of new and sometimes deeply disturbing things to uncover. The game will feed you a ton of lore through conversations and exploration, but there's additional things to find as well. The game is deceptively dense and how much lore there is to find, so it's really up to you how far you want to delve into it. There are copious amounts of voice conversations to be had, even if the world has a distinct lack of what I'd kind of consider flavor NPCs, with many of them kind of just standing around with no lines, voiced or otherwise. This, I think, is becoming a pet peeve of mine, and it's certainly not a thing that is limited to Avowed. It was actually an issue I took with Solasta 2 as well with their demo. Just having single lines from characters like, I don't want to talk to you or go away, it just helps. It helps bring the world together and makes it feel more alive. I know it's like a polished thing and it's a small thing in the grand retrospect, but this is one of those examples of a place where there's so much great voiced conversations in this game. And then there's this small bit that just like, it would have like lifted it up if they had included it, but they didn't. Not right now, Envoy. I'm busy. Seriously, fuck off, Envoy. You're gonna get me fired. But it's the writing, it's the quests themselves though, where the game shines for me most beyond the combat, which I enjoyed. A lot of them are meaningful, well thought out, and some offer twists you don't see coming. There's a lot of heart in the writing of these quests, both the side quests and the main story quests. Yet, again, I run into this wall where I have to add a caveat saying that this is true for about 80% of the quests, especially the main story. There are times where the main story drags or gets a bit too poetic, too obfuscated in the language. And then there are times where you face incredibly consequential decisions that you build up and yet they don't feel altogether properly explained, and then follow up after the fact feels somewhat lacking or all too brief. Decisions that are of huge consequence see very little actual reference. In fact, in some ways, a decision in the beginning of the game to save the imprisoned lady or not make just about as much of a difference as the two of the most consequential decisions you'll make. It's an odd dynamic where some of the side quests are super heartfelt, and then you have these pinnacle moments that ended up falling flat. There were two main moments where I felt like there was a major emotional tug for me. And we're gonna get into major spoiler territory here, like more than so far. So if you want to avoid those spoilers, here's your timestamp, and you can go here and then avoid the spoilers that I'm about to talk about. Now I'm gonna assume that if you're still here, you want to hear about the times that I almost cried in the game. And they're kind of personal. The first big moment for me was when the city of Fjord is first found to be burning. I was in shock. I got literal chills. I wanted to rush to go save it. I was invested. I was sad. I was upset. And then you find that everyone is safe and, you lost some buildings, but that's about it. And then you spend the rest of the game trying to make, the game trying to force you in some ways to make amends with the very person that just burned down the damn city. And that kind of it just takes so much bite out of that. It's one of those, it's like a forced feeling of, no, are you sure you don't like the lady with no skin and just has a skull for a face and fire for eyes and burned down a city to kill people but failed in killing? It's weird in a way.
Hi there, I am your titular villain of this game. I have no face, and I'm really just a scary skeleton that also looks like I would belong in a parade for Dia de los Muertos. However, even though I have done some unthinkable and terrible things in the name of my god, well, you're gonna spend the rest of the game trying to make amends with me. Because, I don't know, some contrived ability to change course, even after I burn a city and kill a bunch of people.
What felt like a climactic turning point where you had to make a decision, choose between the Empire or choose the people of the living lands, was cheapened, and that sucked. Similarly, another key decision tied to this with Ringrim later is cheapened by the end of the game. You make a decision and it finally seems to have sweeping meaning. Though again, it seems to avoid consequential people with more plot armor than a plucky teen in a dystopian novel. In general, we are spared pain too much in this game. We are spared the pain of losing people we care about in the game. Sometimes a story needs that to have weight and feel impactful, and that's one of the places where I feel this game really fell, where it didn't let us feel pain. It didn't let us cry. In fact, the moment I did cry had nothing to do with the main story, which we'll talk about in the companion section. Now, one part I do want to address here is in a sense about exploration and its comparisons to Skyrim, because it was inevitable. I did it. I mean, I went before playing the game. I was like, oh, it's Skyrim, right? It's like Obsidian Skyrim. That's what I want to talk about. I think in part it all comes because of the similarities of being first person, an action RPG, just like I think more like in the future, most CRPGs, if not already, because a lot of people are already comparing it, CRPGs are going to be compared to BG3 because Skyrim was such a generational RPG at the time and BG3 is now a generational RPG. But this idea that it's not Skyrim, I think actually does a disservice to some of the things in this game, the exploration that is more than you would expect. And the world itself, even within its confines, actually encourages a shit ton of exploration. Every hidden note, every secret shortcut, and item upgrades reward your curiosity, creating an environment that feels deliberately crafted in rich detail. It's deceptively large with really 5 big regions. Now, the 5th region is a bit of a spoiler and it's not nearly as large as the other 4, but across all these different places you'll go in and there's lots of little places within that you can just run off and discover and maybe find unique items that are just sitting there waiting to be discovered. You can find side quests, chests full of helpful materials or lore and story. You can find NPCs waiting to be found. One feature I like that helps with this are that some quests, like bounties for example, complete if you kill the bounty first without the quest and stumble upon the quest giver later, giving you 2 places to start the quest. It's something I think the game could have done even more with to add some more organic exploration, as most of those quests are still traditional from the start from the quest giver, but there are at least some that are this way. Again, it's like it's right there. It's so close. It's just like another couple steps in that direction would have bumped the overall quality of this game up a lot. But then there's other little touches like having chests that have a faint sound that are subtle hints that you should look around for something. The game is encouraging you to go do things.
I think that's Maxim Vidaro, the governor's father. He's been missing, gods, 10 years now? I'll wager those artifacts you found fit together somehow. Let's have a closer look at camp.
Except when they throw these little random things like spider webs at you, or that are really just you burn them with your skills or companion skills, but they just feel annoying. They don't feel very organic. They feel very gamey. I don't know how else to explain it other than that. The same as with lockpicking. There is no lockpicking minigame. And I'm not gonna sit here and argue for KCD's lockpicking minigame, which drove me nuts. What was that? Okay, how do we do this?
Stop, sir. What are you doing to that lock? This definitely won't come cheap. You'll learn crime doesn't pay.
Are you fucking with me? But it just kind of, you just hold down a button and then it does it for you. There's something about it that just feels like, even Baldur's Gate 3, they just have a dice roll, and somehow that felt more engaging. But speaking of engaging, let's talk companions.
Just the usual things. Not studying for an exam, having all your teeth fall out. They're not nearly as enjoyable as my more provocative dreams. Oh. Well, just be sure to have a quick release knot if you ever make that fantasy reality. Someone should learn from my mistakes. I certainly have no intention to.
Goodness, we're feeling very honest today, aren't we?
As delightful as you are, we've much to do and less time to do it in. Shall we go?
Companions are a topic that deserves its own spotlight in this review because they are both great and not good enough at the same time. Like with everything, this whole thing is very spoiler heavy, so if you want to skip the spoilers, go to the next section. Like so much of the game, companions feel nearly there. I want to start with an interesting point regarding companions' lack of even treatment when it comes to content. You get 4 companions, but only 2 companion quests. And those companion quests come from the first 2 companions you get. And honestly, those 2 companions may have ultimately been the least interesting, at least to me, Kai and Marius. With Kai, so much of Kai's character seems to reflect you and your own decisions. It was something I noticed when watching another friend's playthrough of the game where Kai seemed to mold around them. Now that in itself can reflect an easygoing character, but it's the rest of Kai's character that just feels surface level, which only enhances the feeling of them just kind of being the mirror for the protagonist. His story is poignant, and perhaps it's just the coldness, the cold deadness of my heart, but I found that I just didn't give a fuck about anything to do with Kai and his former commander. I just didn't care, and it really could just be me. Maybe I'm just an asshole, but it's one of those things where, like, I guess in part because the story felt like every other story you've heard before, it lacked. But he's still better than Marius, in my opinion. Marius, who fills out the role as the somewhat surly grump of the group that is otherwise way too friendly and kind. Everyone, the entire group, is way too friendly and kind to each other. If Veilguard was dinged for not having enough friction among companions, it still has more than Avowed. Everyone is just so accommodating. No disagreements outside of a few harumphs from Marius, who turns out to have a pretty big freaking secret that was actually shocking and disturbing. Despite liking Marius the least, the power of one emotionally charged moment discovering a note from his mother on his mother's skeleton was enough to make my skin crawl. But that's part of the problem. That was the one moment. Other than that, I didn't care. I didn't care about Marius's story because I don't think it was delivered very well. It could have been in a lot of ways because you're dealing with this whole issue of a cult, and it should have been like this emotional tug that I just didn't feel. And I think in part that's because the way that it's foreshadowed throughout the game is that we just keep getting told, hey, he's hiding something. I don't know what, but he's hiding something. He's got some deep pain there, that Marius. But the next 2 companions, well, I actually think it's kind of the opposite. They are really really well written in very different ways. And that's why I think it's so strange that these other two companions, which you ultimately get less actual like side quest story with, but instead are interwoven into the fabric of your main story with Yatsley, with Ringrim, and then Giada with Fjord. It's all like tied in, but they are by far more compelling, at least to me. Yatsley is a curious, enigmatic character. She feels very authentic, a true academic and aspiring wizard, though burdened with some uncertainty. She's a different kind of comic relief in a way that doesn't feel forced, taking on the naughty aunt role very well as the pragmatic curiosity that seems just as willing to question how long it takes someone to freeze to death from Ringrim's spell as she is a fierce defender of her friends and supporter of them.
Please, you found it! I tried using magic to get the face down, but alas. Thankfully, you and your little friends came along and saved the day.
Excuse me. We're all bigger than you are, Nimdude.
I may be small, but my magic is not, I assure you. Of course I can. Are you a wizard as well? Remarkable. An Adiran godlike wizard. You're nearly as fascinating as this godless face. But I'd best pack up. I want to get home. I have a new artifact to study. Thank you for your help, godlike. Even if you didn't have a ladder.
Well, that's something I hope never happens again.
I've got a few inches to spare if she changes her mind.
She's the kind of character that's interesting enough that I would love to see how she develops in the future. And you actually get to have some say in what that development is. But it's Giada who felt by far to me like the most fleshed out character, who had the biggest, longest character progression and story in the game.
One final question, spirits. What is this? Why are you trying to ruin my life again? Is this your way of haunting me? What is it you want?
Not to be pedantic, but that was 4 questions.
We get to see real growth, real trauma, real pain, and real understanding. Giada has a tremendous amount of lines outside of Kai. She really feels like she gets the closest with your character and seems to best understand and reason with you. Like Yatsley, she feels authentic, helped along by a very good performance by Mara Janot, who I believe outshines even the headliner of Brandon Keener, best known for his take as Garrus. But it was a throwaway line, just a small line in a much longer conversation from Yatsley. That actually is the thing that like touched something inside me, that made me have an emotional response, the kind of thing that I long for in well-written RPGs.
There's always a weird sort of quiet on the eve of battle. I'm feeling that now. Seems like a good time to gather our thoughts and share a drink before whatever's coming.
Right. This seems like a perfect place to stop and relax.
Though it's hard enough to tell what's real here without a belly full of drink.
Sounds like you're nervous, dearie.
I'm feeling all kinds of ways. Anxious, excited, scared, hungry.
I feel it as well. It is only mortal to feel overwhelmed in the presence of the immortal. Under the circumstances, that's entirely reasonable.
Join the club.
I'd been more concerned if you weren't scared. Did you think we'd judge you for that?
And I do want to say, like, straight out that this could just be because it resonated with something within me, and it may not resonate with you. But there was a delivery of a line as you're talking, as you're close to the end of the game, talking about how you don't have to put on a brave face, at least not for your companions, that they understand that it's okay to be scared, that you don't have to carry all of the weight. It's delivered with a simplicity and an earnestness that really hit. And it was the part of the game the only part I can think of that actually had me tear up. And I tend to go into games like this with the hopes that this will happen. I treat them, in a sense, like a good TV show, a good movie, or a good book. I want to be hurt. I live for those moments in RPGs, and like there was a shit ton of those moments in Baldur's Gate 3, and I'm kind of expecting a lot of those moments in a game like Expedition 33. In Avowed, they were just too far and few in between. And most of the moments that actually felt raw came from Giada and their relation to the main villain of the game, a villain that actually kind of feels lacking, which is probably another issue with the game. From a gameplay standpoint, one significant flaw that I encountered was the lack of companion customization. The game gives surprisingly minimal control over their skills, gear, and appearance. Each companion has a role. Giada is a healer, Yatsli and Marius are range damage and control, and Kai is the tank. You have a few skill points for each of them, but they're largely minimal in customization. Additionally, visual customization of your companion's armor comes through cosmetics from things like pre-orders and such, and you don't have any ability to equip them or give them any gear. You can only have a maximum of 2 active companions, at least until the very end of the game, and with only 4 total. It often feels like you're missing out on critical narrative beats and deeper relationship development. This restriction contributes to a sense that the companion system, while promising, is ultimately a little undercooked. If they limited to 4 companions, which ultimately felt like a small number as it was, further limitations make that feel just a bit worse. I think that smaller pool of companions is also what compounds that lack of friction. When you only have 4 companions to choose from, it limits the risks you can take. There's no Lae'zel and Shadowheart, no Alistair and Morrigan. Everyone just seems to kind of get along and go along with what you say. Now, I will say that this is in part potentially because I didn't do anything ostensibly evil. I kind of went probably the way that the devs expect most people to play the game, kind of the nice way to play, I guess. And you can make some decisions in the game, like some meaningful decisions that are decidedly not nice. And that's actually another part that I want to highlight as being good in this game. The dialogue options you get are pretty varied. And they don't hold back. I think they're actually a really solid part of this game. Not just your dialogue with companions, but your dialogue with other NPCs. So I do expect that there could have been a bit more friction between your character and the game. Like, for example, I don't think Giada would have been super excited and happy with me if I decided to go ahead and side with Haunted Halloween. The thing is, the reason why I'm passionate about this part of the critique, this criticism of the game, is because it's there, like it's almost there. Throughout the game, I felt like I kept wanting deeper narrative connection to these companions. I wanted to see more of them. I wanted them to be a bigger part of the game. It felt like they were so close to getting there, they just needed to push it a little bit further. Make every character the baseline be the kind of connection with Giada. Make every character, at the very least, have their own optional side quests. And just make, even from a combat standpoint, at least let me give them gear. I think the companion system had the potential to be the strongest system in Avowed, but for me, at the end, the strongest system became the combat. But I want to talk about perhaps the largest critique in the game, and one that I tend to agree with. The cost. Selling this game for $70 can leave just a bit of a bad taste in one's mouth. There's just so much additional scrutiny that comes with that price tag. It needs to warrant costing $10 more than Baldur's Gate 3, KCD2, or Veilguard, and it just doesn't. Which is another critique of another RPG I had just last year, like Dragon's Dogma 2. It's an albatross around the game's neck. There is some saving grace here that the game was also available on Game Pass, so you can essentially rent it for much less, which is what I did, but that just doubles down on my opinion that the game shouldn't have jumped to that premium cost. I know we're probably like a year away or less from most titles pricing at $70, but until then, it's a sore spot. The lengthy nature of the game also leads to a bit of repetition in the enemy types. After battling a slew of similar foes, Zareb, skeletons, spiders, beetles, and bears, it starts to feel like the variety could use a boost. And funnily enough, that's actually the same issue I had with Dragon's Dogma 2, the other game that is also overpriced at $70, where there was a feeling of a definite repetition of too many of the exact same enemy types over and over again. Although I would say that Avowed does a little bit of a better job in that case. And it's so frustratingly close, and the animations are so good. Like, the NPC models are actually fantastic. They're really, really well done. And I feel like it just like 2 or 3 more enemy types, especially like animal types, might have done it. The enemies themselves are great. Like, I felt like there was a decent enough difference in the types of combat you engage with the enemies. Some of them like exploding, some of them using like having shielding, some of them having spell casting. Healers were total freaking dicks, and they were always the thing you had to take out. It was so close, and the types that they did have were so good that it was a little frustrating that it does get a little bit repetitive. Now, one of the things I realized as I rounded out this review is that I'm critiquing the game a lot, despite saying that this could potentially be one of the most underrated games this year. The reason why I'm saying that is because the critiques are coming from a place of, I loved this game, but I wanted more. Like, I loved so many things about this game, and it just about reached where I wanted it to reach. It just didn't quite get there. The reason why I say it's going to be underrated is because I think this year has quite a few games that are going to reach that potential. A lot of games that are going to overshadow it, and perhaps this might be a game that you circle back to, not this year, but next year or the year after. It's a game that I think is definitely worth playing. It's a game that I think you will enjoy your experience in, even if it just slightly misses out on a couple things. It has fantastic characters, the lore and the world. I'm hooked, I'm interested, I want to know more. I thought the overall story was a compelling story, even if it was a bit obvious what was gonna happen by about halfway through the game, if not earlier. It's also a game that really rewards exploration. The movement is fluid. The game itself is a beautiful game. I'm always a little hazy on games built in Unreal Engine because they tend to have like graphical issues. But as I played this and as I got to see the different little areas of the game, like, I was actually blown away by a couple places. It's a very pretty game that I enjoyed spending my time in. It did not feel, as I was playing this game, that it was a chore. I just felt like I wanted a little bit more out of things than what I got. So like I was saying, it's a very solid RPG. It's just not, and never will be, in my opinion, a great RPG. My name is Edward Flynn. Thank you so much for watching this long as fuck video. My voice hurts, so, or throat, whatever. Thank you so much. I'm gonna go get some water, and I appreciate you all very much, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day.